It was a normal Friday evening when I decided to visit Walmart. I needed a few things: groceries, some toiletries, and a pack of batteries for my flashlight. The weather outside was gloomy with heavy clouds threatening rain, but I didn't think much of it. I grabbed my shopping list and drove to the store. When I arrived, the parking lot was unusually empty. I thought it was strange, especially for a Friday night. Walmart is usually packed. The automatic sliding doors creaked as they opened, and a chill ran down my spine as I stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed louder than usual, and there was no music playing on the store's speakers. I looked around for other shoppers but saw no one. A single cashier stood at the far end of the store staring blankly ahead. I tried to brush off the eerie feeling and headed to the produce section. As I picked up a few apples, I heard a faint whisper. I froze and looked around, but no one was there. The whispering continued, growing louder, but the words were impossible to understand. It sounded like a mix of voices, all overlapping. I shook my head and told myself I was imagining things. I moved to the next aisle, where the toiletries were. As I grabbed a bottle of shampoo, something caught my eye. A shadow darted past the end of the aisle. I quickly turned, but there was nothing there. My heart started. I decided to hurry and finish my shopping. I went to the electronics section to grab the batteries. The aisle was dark, only one of the overhead lights was working. As I walked toward the batteries, I felt like someone was watching me. I turned around and saw a figure standing at the end of the aisle. It wasn't a normal person. The figure was tall, with long arms and a head that seemed too small for its body. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over its bones. I blinked, and it was gone. At this point, I was ready to leave. I rushed toward the checkout area, clutching my basket tightly. The cashier I had seen earlier was still there, but something about her had changed. Her face looked wrong, like it was made of wax and melting. She turned to look at me, and her eyes were completely black. I dropped my basket and ran toward the exit. The automatic doors didn't open. I slammed into the glass, desperate to get out, but they wouldn't budge. Behind me, I heard footsteps, slow, heavy, and deliberate. I turned and saw the tall figure again, standing in the middle of the store. It was holding something, a Walmart vest. My vest. I didn't even work there, but somehow it had my name on it. The lights started to flicker, and the whispers returned, louder and more chaotic. I screamed, pounding on the glass doors, begging for someone to hear me. Suddenly, the doors slid open, and I fell outside. When I looked back, the store was completely dark. The figure, the cashier, the whispers, they were all gone. The parking lot was empty except for my car. I didn't look back as I drove away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the whispers and seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye. The next morning, I told a friend about what happened. They looked at me with wide eyes and said, "That Walmart closed down years ago. I haven't been able to step foot in another Walmart since." At first, I thought my friend was messing with me. "What do you mean it's closed?" I asked, my voice shaky. They frowned and pulled out their phone. After a few taps, they turned the screen toward me. It was an old news article, dated 2 years ago. "Walmart closes after mysterious incident," the headline read. My heart racing. Apparently, a massive power outage had occurred during operating hours. Witnesses reported strange occurrences, lights flickering, disembodied voices, and the sound of footsteps in empty aisles. Several employees quit on the spot, refusing to return to work. Shortly after, the store shut down for good. "But that can't be," I stammered. "I was just there, last night." My friend gave me a worried look. "Are you sure? Maybe you went to a different location." I shook my head. I knew what I saw. I could still picture the layout of the store, the dim lights, and that thing with the Walmart vest. To prove I wasn't crazy, I decided to drive back. My friend reluctantly agreed to come with me, though I could tell they thought I was losing it. The drive felt longer than before, and the road seemed emptier than usual. When we reached the lot, my stomach dropped. The store was there, but it looked abandoned. The windows were boarded up, and the parking lot was cracked and overgrown with weeds. Faded letters on the side of the building spelled out Walmart, but the sign was covered in graffiti. I got out of the car, my legs trembling. My friend stayed behind, yelling out the window, "This isn't a good idea." Ignoring them, I walked toward the front entrance. The glass doors were filthy, covered in grime and handprints. I pressed my face against the glass, trying to see inside. The interior was dark, but I could make out rows of empty shelves. As I stared, I felt a sense of déjà vu. The layout was exactly the same as the store I'd been in last night. Suddenly, something moved inside. A shadow darted between the aisles, too fast for me to see clearly. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a broken shopping cart. "Let's go," my friend shouted, but I couldn't leave. I needed answers. I tried the doors, but they were locked. Then I noticed a side entrance around the corner. It was slightly ajar, as if someone or something had left it open. Against my better judgment, I slipped inside. The air was stale and cold, carrying a faint metallic smell that made me nauseous. The shelves were empty, but there were footprints in the dust on the floor. As I walked deeper into the store, the whispers started again. They were faint at first, but they grew louder with every step. "Get out." The voice was clear this time. It echoed through the aisles, sending chills down my spine. "I don't want trouble," I called out, my voice trembling. But the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, overlapping and distorting into something unnatural. Suddenly, the lights flickered on. I found myself standing in the middle of the electronics section, just like the night before. The batteries were still on the shelf, but something was wrong. The packages were torn, and the batteries inside were corroded, as if they'd been sitting there for decades. I stepped back, my chest tightening. That's when I saw the figure again. It was standing at the far end of the aisle, staring at me. Its head tilted unnaturally to one side, and its empty black eyes seemed to pierce right through me. "You shouldn't have come back," it rasped. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced myself to move. I turned and ran, weaving through the aisles, the whispers chasing me. As I neared the exit, I heard heavy footsteps behind me. I glanced back and saw the figure running toward me, its long arms reaching out. I screamed and threw myself against the doors. This time they opened. I stumbled outside, gasping for air. My friend was waiting by the car, their face pale. "What the hell happened in there?" they yelled. "I don't know," I panted. "But we're leaving, now." We didn't speak on the drive home. I could feel their eyes on me, but I was too shaken to explain. That night, I had the worst nightmare of my life. I was back in the store, wandering the aisles. The whispers were louder than ever, and the figure was always just out of sight. When I finally saw it, it wasn't alone. Dozens of them surrounded me, each wearing a tattered Walmart vest with my name on it. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart racing, but the worst part was the sound. Even though I was wide awake, I could still hear the whispers. They haven't stopped since. Over the next few days, the whispers followed me everywhere. At first, they were faint, like a breeze brushing against my ear, but they grew louder, more persistent. I started seeing shadows move in my peripheral vision, always disappearing when I turned my head. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I had to find a way to end it. I spent hours researching the Walmart and its history. What I found sent chills down my spine. Years ago, there had been a series of disappearances linked to the store. Employees claimed they saw strange things, figures in the aisles, voices calling their names, items moving on their own. The store was eventually shut down after one employee vanished during a night shift. The official reports called it a tragic accident, but witnesses claimed otherwise. They spoke of the Shadow Man, a tall figure that haunted the store. No one could explain it, but everyone who encountered it seemed to suffer afterward. I realized I wasn't just dealing with a haunted building. Something had attached itself to me, and it wasn't going to let go. Desperate for help, I contacted a local paranormal investigator. Her name was Marcy, and she'd dealt with cases like this before, or so she claimed. When Marcy arrived at my house, she immediately frowned. "The energy here is heavy," she said, lighting a bundle of sage. "Whatever followed you from that store isn't just a spirit, it's something much darker." She set up candles, crystals, and other tools I didn't recognize. Then she began a ritual, chanting words I couldn't understand. The air in the room grew colder, and the whispers became deafening. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a shadow appeared in the corner of the room. It was the figure, the same one from the store. Its black eyes locked onto me, and I felt frozen in place. Marcy shouted something, throwing a handful of powder into the air. The shadow let out a guttural scream and vanished. The whispers stopped, and the room fell silent. "It's gone," Marcy said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "At least for now. But you need to stay away from that store. Whatever's there, it's ancient, and it feeds on fear." I nodded, too shaken to speak. It's been weeks since the ritual, and my life has slowly returned to normal. The whispers are gone, and I haven't seen any shadows. But every now and then, I feel like I'm being watched. I've stopped shopping at Walmart altogether. Whenever I drive past one, I feel a chill run down my spine. And sometimes, late at night, I hear faint footsteps outside my window. It all started on a Friday evening. I had just finished dinner when I realized I needed a few things for the weekend. My list was simple: milk, bread, and some snacks. I decided to head to the Walmart near my house. It was late, around 10 p.m., but I figured it would be quick. When I arrived, the parking lot was almost empty. A few cars were scattered here and there, and the huge store seemed unusually quiet. I shrugged it off, assuming it was because of the late hour. Grabbing a cart, I walked through the sliding doors. Inside, the atmosphere felt different. The fluorescent lights flickered faintly, casting weird shadows on the floor. There was no cheerful music playing over the speakers, just a low hum from the air conditioning. I noticed only a handful of employees, and none of them greeted me like they usually did. I pushed my cart toward the dairy section. As I walked, I felt like someone was watching me. Every time I turned around, no one was. The aisles seemed longer than usual, almost endless. When I finally reached the milk section, I grabbed a carton and put it in my cart. That's when I heard it, a faint, scratching sound. It was coming from the next aisle over. I froze, listening carefully. Probably just a stalker working late, I told myself, trying to shake off the unease. I turned into the snack aisle, looking for chips. The scratching sound grew louder, more distinct. It didn't sound like a person, it was more deliberate, like claws scraping against metal. I looked around the aisle, but it was empty. The shelves, usually packed with snacks, seemed strangely sparse. As I picked up a bag of chips, I noticed something on the floor, a trail of small, wet footprints leading down the aisle. They were too small to belong to an adult. My heart began to race. I followed the trail, my cart forgotten. The prints led me to the back of the store, near the stock room. The scratching sound was louder now, echoing from behind the heavy metal door marked "Employees Only." I hesitated. Every instinct told me to turn around and leave, but my curiosity got the better of me. Slowly, I pushed the door open. The stock room was dimly lit, filled with towering shelves and boxes. The air smelled damp, almost moldy. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the silence. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. No answer. As I ventured further, I noticed the shelves were covered in deep, jagged scratches, like something had been clawing at them. The footprints continued through the room, leading to a dark corner. That's when I saw it. A figure crouched in the shadows, its back to me. It was small, childlike, but something was horribly wrong. Its limbs were twisted at odd angles, and its skin was pale, almost translucent. It was hunched over, making that awful scratching noise with its clawed fingers. I gasped, and the figure turned. Its face was inhuman, with sunken eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. Its mouth stretched unnaturally wide, filled with sharp, uneven teeth. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then it let out a low, guttural growl and started crawling toward me at an impossible speed. I turned and ran, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. The thing chased me, its claws scraping against the floor. I burst out of the stockroom, slamming the door behind me. The scratching continued for a moment, then stopped. The store was eerily quiet again, as if nothing had happened. I didn't stop to grab my cart or pay for the milk. I just ran out of the store, got in my car, and drove home as fast as I could. For weeks after that night, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. I avoided that Walmart, driving to a different one, even though it was farther away. One day, curiosity got the better of me. I searched online for anything about strange occurrences at that Walmart. I found an old article about a child who had gone missing in the store years ago. The parents claimed the child had been playing near the stockroom before disappearing. The case was never solved. I don't know what I saw that night, but I know one thing for sure: I'm never going back to that Walmart again. For the next few nights, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing's face, the pale skin, the sunken eyes, the impossibly wide grin. I kept hearing the sound of its claws scraping the floor. I thought maybe I had imagined it. Maybe I was just overtired, or my mind was playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew what I saw was real. A week later, I was driving home late from work. I passed the Walmart, and something caught my eye. In the parking lot, near the far edge, was a figure. It was standing under a flickering streetlight. At first, I thought it was just a person waiting for someone, but as I slowed down, I realized it wasn't moving. My stomach dropped. The figure was small, with a hunched posture, just like the thing I had seen in the stockroom. Its head was tilted at an odd angle, as if it were watching me. I sped up and didn't look back. That night, I dreamed of the Walmart. In the dream, I was back in the stockroom, but it was different this time. The lights were completely out, and the shelves were empty. I could hear the sound of breathing all around me, heavy and raspy. I tried to move, but my feet wouldn't budge. Then I heard the scratching again. It started softly, then grew louder and louder until it was deafening. The shadows in the room seemed to move, shifting closer and closer. When I woke up, I was drenched in sweat. My heart was racing, and I could still hear the scratching in my ears. The next morning, I told my best friend Mia about what had happened. She listened carefully, her expression shifting from disbelief to concern. "That's really creepy," she said. "But maybe it was just some kind of prank, or an animal that got into the store." "It wasn't an animal, and it wasn't a prank. This thing wasn't human, Mia." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, I believe you. But if it's bothering you this much, maybe we should go back to the Walmart and check it out together, in the daytime." The thought of going back terrified me, but I agreed. I needed answers. The next afternoon, we drove to the Walmart. The parking lot was busy, filled with shoppers and cars. It looked so normal in the daylight that I almost convinced myself I had imagined everything. Inside, the store was bright and bustling. People were pushing carts, kids were running around, and employees were stocking shelves. It was hard to believe this was the same place where I had seen that thing. We wandered around for a while, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I showed Mia the snack aisle where I had first noticed the footprints, but the floor was spotless. "See," she said, "maybe you were just stressed that night." But when we reached the back of the store, near the stockroom, I felt it again, that same uneasy feeling, like someone was watching me. Mia noticed my discomfort. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied. The stockroom door was closed, just like before. I stared at it, debating whether to open it. Before I could decide, Mia stepped forward and pushed the door open. "Wait," I whispered, but it was too late. The stockroom looked normal. The lights were on, and employees were moving boxes around. No scratches on the shelves, no footprints on the floor. "See? Nothing to worry about," Mia said, smiling. I tried to relax, but something still felt off. As we turned to leave, I heard it again, the faint scratching sound. I froze. Mia stopped too, her smile fading. "Did you hear that?" she asked. I nodded, my throat dry. The sound grew louder, coming from somewhere deeper in the stockroom. The employees didn't seem to notice it at all. Mia grabbed my arm. "Let's go," she said, her voice shaking. We hurried out of the store, not stopping until we were back in the car. That night, I dreamed of the Walmart again. This time, I wasn't alone. Mia was with me, and we were both trapped in the stockroom. The lights flickered, and the air felt heavy. The scratching sound surrounded us, echoing from every direction. Then we saw them, multiple figures emerging from the shadows. They all looked like the creature I had seen before, but each one was slightly different. Some were smaller, others larger, and all of them were moving toward us. Mia screamed, and I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The creatures closed in, their glowing eyes staring into mine. When I woke up, I could still feel their eyes on me. After that night, Mia stopped talking about what happened. Whenever I brought it up, she changed the subject or brushed it off. I could tell she was scared, but she didn't want to admit it. Strange things started happening around my house. I would hear scratching sounds outside my windows at night, even though there was nothing there when I checked. My lights would flicker for no reason, and my pets refused to go near certain areas of the house. One night, I came home to find the words "Help Us" scratched into my front door. The letters were jagged and uneven, as if they had been carved by claws. I don't know what those things are or what they want, but I have a feeling this isn't over. After finding the words "Help Us" scratched into my front door, I realized this wasn't just about Walmart anymore. Whatever I'd encountered that night wasn't confined to the store. It had followed me. I called Mia immediately and told her what had happened. She was quiet for a long time before finally speaking. Do you think it's trying to tell you something?" she asked. "Tell me what?" I snapped, frustration and fear making my voice shake. "Why would it follow me? I didn't do anything." Mia sighed. "I don't know. But maybe it's not just one thing. What if it's tied to the store, or the people who went missing there?" Her words sent a chill down my spine. I remembered the article I'd read about the missing child. Could there have been others? I spent the rest of the night scouring the internet, looking for anything I could find about the Walmart. The deeper I dug, the more unsettling things I uncovered. Over the past decade, there had been multiple disappearances tied to the store. Most of them were dismissed as runaways or isolated incidents, but the pattern was undeniable. All of the missing people were last seen near the Walmart. Even stranger, I found an old forum thread from a former employee. In it, they described hearing strange noises in the stockroom, scratching, whispering, and even faint cries for help. They claimed they had quit after finding claw marks on the shelves and seeing shadowy figures moving in the corners of their vision. The thread was over 6 years old, but the details matched my experience almost exactly. The next day, Mia and I made a decision that still haunts me. We would go back to the Walmart one last time. We needed answers. This time, we planned carefully. We brought flashlights, portable phone chargers, and even a small pocket knife for protection. We arrived at the store just before closing time. The parking lot was nearly empty again, just like the first night. "Are you sure about this?" Mia asked as we stood by the entrance. "No," I admitted, "but I have to know." We walked into the store. The atmosphere was just as unsettling as before. Flickering lights, long shadows, and an eerie silence. Most of the employees were gone, and the few that remained didn't seem to notice us. We headed straight for the stockroom. This time, there was no hesitation. I pushed the door open, and we stepped inside. The stockroom looked normal at first, but as we ventured deeper, things began to change. The air grew colder, and the familiar scratching sounds started again, faint but persistent. We followed the sound, our flashlights cutting through the dim light. The shelves were empty, and the walls were covered in deep scratches, just like I had seen before. Then we found it, a trapdoor hidden beneath a stack of old boxes. The scratches around it were fresh, as if something had been clawing at it from below. Mia hesitated. "We shouldn't open it," she whispered, but I couldn't stop myself. My hands moved on their own as I pulled the trapdoor open. A narrow staircase led down into darkness. The air that wafted up smelled damp and metallic, like blood and rust. Mia grabbed my arm. "Please, let's just go." "We've come this far," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We descended the stairs, our flashlights barely piercing the darkness. The steps creaked under our weight, and the scratching sound grew louder with every step. At the bottom of the staircase was a long, narrow hallway. The walls were made of concrete, but they were covered in strange symbols that looked ancient, carved deeply into the stone. The hallway led to a large open room. In the center of the room was a pit, and around the pit were piles of bones. Some were animal, but others were unmistakably human. Mia gasped, covering her mouth. Then we heard it, a low, guttural growl coming from the pit. Slowly something began to crawl out. It was one of the creatures, but this one was larger than the others I had seen. Its limbs were longer, its claws sharper, and its eyes glowed brighter. It stared at us for a moment, then let out an ear-piercing screech. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Mia's arm. We turned and bolted back down the hallway. The creature was right behind us, its claws scraping against the walls. We reached the staircase and scrambled up as fast as we. As we emerged into the stockroom, I slammed the trapdoor shut and threw a heavy box on top of it. The scratching continued from below, but it didn't follow us. We didn't stop running until we were in the car, speeding away from the store. "What was that thing?" Mia whispered, her face pale. "I don't know," I said, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. We called the police anonymously, reporting the trapdoor and what we had seen. I don't know if they ever investigated, but the Walmart closed permanently a few weeks later. The building still stands, abandoned and decaying. Sometimes I drive by it out of morbid curiosity. The parking lot is overgrown, and the windows are boarded up. But every time I pass, I feel the same eerie sensation that someone or something is watching me. I'll never forget what I saw in that stockroom, and I'll never set foot in another Walmart again. Months passed, and life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after everything I'd experienced. Mia and I rarely talked about that night. It was as if we both silently agreed that speaking of it would somehow invite it back. But I couldn't let it go entirely. Something about that trap door, the creatures, and the eerie plea for help scratched into my door haunted me. I spent sleepless nights researching symbols like the ones we saw in the hallway. They appeared in ancient texts linked to rituals and forgotten gods, things that were better left buried. I was determined to put it all behind me, but the universe had other plans. One night, I woke up to a noise outside my window. It was faint at first, but unmistakable, the sound of scratching. My blood ran cold. Slowly, I got out of bed and crept to the window, my heart pounding in my chest. I pulled back the curtain, and there it was. The creature stood on my lawn, its glowing eyes fixed on me, but it wasn't alone. Behind it, more figures emerged from the shadows, their twisted forms illuminated by the pale moonlight. I stumbled back, my mind racing. How had they found me? What did they want? Before I could react, the lights in my house flickered and went out. The scratching grew louder, surrounding me from every side. Desperation took over. I grabbed my phone and called Mia. She picked up on the first ring. "They're here," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm already on my way," she said, her voice just as panicked. I didn't ask how she knew. Somehow, we were both connected to this nightmare now. I ran to the front door, but the creatures were already there, their claws scratching at the wood. I was trapped. The scratching turned into pounding. The door began to splinter, and I knew it wouldn't hold for long. I grabbed the pocket knife I had kept since that night at Walmart, though I knew it would be useless. Just as the door gave way, headlights flooded the front yard. Mia's car screeched to a stop, and she honked the horn, the noise startling the creatures. "Get in!" she screamed, leaning out of the driver's side window. I didn't think, I just ran. The creatures lunged at me, their claws grazing my back as I dove into the car. Mia hit the gas, and we sped away, leaving the creatures behind. That night, we made a pact. We packed what we could and left town without looking back. We didn't tell anyone where we were going or why. We moved to a new city, started over. For a while, things were quiet. There were no strange dreams, no scratching sounds, no glowing eyes in the dark. But deep down, I knew the nightmare wasn't truly over. I could still feel their presence, lingering just out of sight. Even now, years later, I avoid big box stores. I never let my guard down. And every so often, I'll hear a faint scratching sound in the distance, like a whisper of a warning. They're still watching. I've learned to live with the fear, but I'll never forget what happened. If you ever find yourself alone in a Walmart late at night and you hear scratching sounds or see shadows that don't belong, do yourself a favor, leave. Don't look back, because once you've seen them, they'll never let you go. It was a late night when I walked into Walmart, the one located on the edge of town. I had just finished a long day at work and needed to grab a few things. The parking lot was almost empty, and the store looked dark from the outside, like it was on the verge of closing. But I knew they were open 24 hours, so I pushed through the automatic doors and stepped inside. The air was cooler than usual, and there was a strange silence that hung in the aisles. Normally, the store was busy at this hour, filled with people rushing to grab last-minute items or workers stocking shelves. But tonight, it felt different. The usual hum of fluorescent lights seemed quieter, almost like the building itself was holding its breath. I walked down the aisles, grabbing what I needed: a loaf of bread, some milk, and a few snacks. I tried to shake off the unease creeping over me, but it was hard. I passed by the toy section, where a strange flickering light caught my eye. It was a small display of battery-powered dolls. One of the dolls, a girl in a pink dress with long brown hair, was twitching. The light above it flickered as though the power was going out, and the doll's eyes blinked in rapid succession, despite no one being near it. Shivers ran down my spine, but I convinced myself it was just a glitch in the lights. I moved on, trying not to look back. But as I turned the corner, I saw something strange, a figure standing at the end of the aisle. At first I thought it was another shopper, but something about the person didn't seem right. The figure was tall, too tall, with an unnaturally long body. Their face was obscured by shadows, but I could feel their gaze, like they were watching me, waiting for me to move. I froze for a moment, unsure of what to do, but the figure didn't move, so I decided to keep going, walking as quickly as I could without drawing attention. As I passed the aisle, I glanced over and saw nothing. No figure, no shadow, just empty shelves. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding and shook my head. It had to be my imagination. I was exhausted, and the store's eerie atmosphere was playing tricks on me. But as I turned the corner toward the checkout lanes, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. The same figure, taller now, looming just behind the rows of registers, its head tilted to the side as though studying me, was standing there, barely visible in the dim light. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my cart, my mind racing. This wasn't normal. There was something wrong with this place, something I couldn't explain. The air grew heavier, colder, and I could hear faint whispers, voices that didn't belong to anyone around me. My pulse quickened as I rushed toward the exit, desperate to leave. But just as I reached the doors, they didn't open. The automatic doors were frozen in place, not responding to my touch or the sensor. I turned around, searching the store for someone, anyone, who could help. But the aisles were empty. The only thing left was the flickering lights, casting strange shadows on the walls. That was when I heard the footsteps, soft, dragging footsteps that echoed through the silence. They were coming closer. I spun around, hoping to find someone, anyone to help me. But all I saw was darkness. The shelves around me seemed to stretch on forever, like the store was growing, expanding into something that wasn't quite real. And then, in the distance, I saw the figure again. Only this time, it wasn't standing still. It was moving toward me. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest as I backed away from the approaching figure. My palms were sweating, and my breath came in shallow gasps. I didn't know what it was, but I could sense it was no ordinary person. The way it moved, unnaturally slow, deliberate, made my skin crawl. Its shadow stretched far beyond what should have been possible, flickering and dancing across the aisles, growing larger with every step. The whispers were louder now, overlapping, a chorus of voices that seemed to come from nowhere, surrounding me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My throat was dry, tight with fear. The figure was getting closer, its face still hidden by shadows. But now I could make out something else, its hands, long, too long, and twitching as if they were waiting to grab hold of something, to drag it into the darkness. I turned, desperately looking for an escape. The automatic door was still stuck, locked in place, refusing to open. Panic flooded my body. I tried to push against it, slamming my body into the glass, but it didn't budge. I was trapped. Behind me, I heard the footsteps again, slow, deliberate, closer now. I felt the cold air that had surrounded me before grow even colder, like the temperature was dropping rapidly. Turning around, I saw the figure now standing directly in front of me, its face still concealed in shadow. But this time there was a faint glimmer, a flash of light, like the reflection of something sharp. Its eyes, if they could even be called that, were black, empty, hollow voids that seemed to pierce right through me. I felt the darkness pulling me in, my vision blurring, and I stumbled backward, disoriented. "Leave me alone!" I finally managed to croak, though my voice sounded foreign, as if it wasn't even my own. The figure didn't answer. It simply raised one of its long, twisted arms toward me. The air grew heavier, suffocating, like I was drowning in it. That's when I heard it. The crash. The door to the back storage room, which I hadn't noticed until now, slammed open. A light flickered on, and for a moment, I saw another figure standing in the doorway. Someone wearing the Walmart uniform, a worker who looked as though they'd been waiting for me. But this was no ordinary worker. Their face was pale, expressionless, and their eyes were wide open, unblinking. The whispering voices grew louder as they stepped into the aisle, walking with unnatural calm toward the figure in front of me. Without saying a word, they extended their hand, as if offering it to me. Something about this new figure felt wrong too, like they were part of the same twisted nightmare that had taken hold of the store. I felt my body tremble, my legs unable to move. There was no escape. As if sensing my hesitation, the Walmart worker spoke, only it wasn't with their own voice. "Join us," the voice rasped, deep and guttural. "You're already part of this place. You were always meant to be here." The words sent a shock through me. I didn't understand. What did they mean? Before I could react, the first figure raised its hand to its own face, pulling away a mask that looked like it was made of shadow, revealing something that wasn't human at all. The face underneath was a twisted, contorted version of a human face, with hollow eyes and a grotesque grin that stretched far too wide. And that's when I realized the truth. The store wasn't just a building, it was alive. It fed on fear, on the souls of those who walked through its doors, trapping them inside. It had been waiting for me, pulling me into its web. The whispers, the figures, the cold, it was all part of its hunger. And now, there was no way out. I felt a hand, icy and unnatural, grip my shoulder. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was the face of the worker, now distorted and smirking, as they whispered one final word: "Welcome." The store fell silent again, its lights flickering as if nothing had ever happened. The next morning, when the store opened for business, no one seemed to notice anything unusual. Everything was as it should be, except, of course, for the one missing customer. Somewhere deep inside the store, a new shadow lurked, waiting for the next soul to walk through the doors.